Decision Day. The president will announce his pick for the Supreme Court. We have a preview, including what pro-lifers are saying. Back and forth, North Korea and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have very different descriptions of their recent talks. Disappearing Act, what Pope Francis says about the future of Christians in the Middle East. And a glove story for Catholic priests in Missouri and Kansas. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, July 9th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Speculation swirls as President Trump plans to announce his replacement for retired Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. His decision tonight could cement a conservative majority on the court for decades. And pro-life supporters believe it could be the last piece of the puzzle needed to overturn Roe versus Wade. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump promised to choose a Supreme Court nominee with, quote, impeccable credentials, great intellect, and unbiased judgment. The White House has done everything it can to keep this decision secret up to the big announcement at 9 tonight.
I'm very close to making a decision. Have not made it official yet.
President Trump plans to reveal his decision to fill the high court seat just hours from now. Since late last year, the White House has been circulating a list of 25 candidates. The names vetted by conservative policy groups like the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Sunday afternoon, the president saying he's narrowed the list to 4.
Let's say it's the 4 people, but they're excellent. Everyone, you can't go wrong.
The reported frontrunners, all federal appeals court judges: Brett Kavanaugh, Raymond Kethledge, Thomas Hardiman, and Amy Coney Barrett.
Obviously, as a woman, I think that Amy Barrett is superior.
Missy Smith joined a small pro-life rally outside the White House today.
Abortion is murder. Overturn Roe.
The group is holding vigil until the president announces his decision tonight. Smith is confident the president's nominee would be the deciding vote to overturn Roe v. Wade if the landmark case to legalize abortion was challenged in the Supreme Court.
It's the first chance in 45 years that we will have to overturn Roe, and it needs to be overturned.
Going all the way back to the campaign trail, the president committed to nominating conservative judges. After his first pick, Neil Gorsuch, was appointed to the high court, the president was praised by pro-life organizations. Current contenders have received the thumbs up from pro-life groups, but the White House says the president won't be questioning the potential nominees about Roe v. Wade.
The president is pro-life, but in terms of the process of selecting a Supreme Court nominee, as the president said last week, he's not going to discuss specific cases with those nominees.
The future of Roe v. Wade is perhaps the most contentious issue that will undoubtedly come up as the president's nominee goes for confirmation in front of the Senate. I will report from inside the White House tonight as the president announces his Supreme Court pick, and we will be broadcasting live on Facebook. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Pro-life groups are ready to pounce when tonight's Supreme Court suspense ends. The campaign to win over senators begins. Correspondent Jason Calvi tells us the president's choice better be ready for a battle. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Republicans have just enough of their own senators to confirm this nominee, but 2 of those Republicans are supporters of abortion, so this topic could be key to a confirmation.
I think the path to confirmation for any of these final 4 is not a problem.
But that path in the Senate will be bumpy.
I fully expect Democrats in Congress to light their hair on fire.
So much on the line, retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy was the key swing vote on marriage and abortion. And the president promised in 2016 to appoint pro-life judges.
Thank you so much.
Considering the ample evidence that President Trump will only select a nominee who will vote to overturn Roe v. Wade, the next nominee has an obligation, a serious and solemn obligation, to share their personal views on these legal issues.
Pro-life groups say they're looking forward to that abortion decision being reversed.
I think the president will choose wisely, somebody that's committed to the Constitution and the rule of law, and I expect somebody that could see right through the decision of Roe versus Wade and understand that there's no foundation to it from a constitutional perspective.
Still, conservative groups worked behind the scenes to influence the president's decision.
Outside organizations, and as well as I'm sure senators, are weighing in with the White House, weighing in with the president, and saying, here's why we think this person is better than that person.
There is a lot of lobbying going on behind the scenes of White House officials. Furious is the word I would use. Not angry, but, there's a lot of energy.
As soon as the president names his pick, pro-life groups will be working with their supporters across the country to make sure this person is confirmed. They're planning press conferences tomorrow in states where Democratic senators are up for re-election, in states that President Trump won. That includes North Dakota, Indiana, and West Virginia. Now, the conservative Judicial Crisis Network is launching a $1.4 million ad campaign. They're targeting these vulnerable Democrats. But liberal group Demand Justice is trying to drum up support against the nominee to make it safe for those Democrats to vote no. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Joining me now is John Malcolm, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. John, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Lauren.
So good to see you, too, because you know this process very, very well. We've had this conversation before in 2016 when we were looking for a justice for Antonin Scalia's seat. You compiled a list at the time, and 7 of the 8 of those have made it to the Trump 25 list. So you know what you're talking about. We're just making sure everybody knows your bona fides there. His choice is very closely guarded. Brett Kavanaugh, the judge of Maryland, sits on the U.S. Court of Appeals. He is at the top of your list, I believe. He's a former clerk of Justice Kennedy, well known in Washington. He's taken some early criticism, though, from social conservatives. Even with that criticism, why do you think he would make the best justice?
Well, Brett Kavanaugh is a very distinguished judge on the D.C. Circuit, which is frequently considered the second highest court in the land. He's held other very responsible positions in government, including being a senior advisor to President George W. Bush for 5 years. He's authored over 300 opinions on a whole host of very, very important issues, and he is respected for his intellectual skills by judges across the political spectrum all around the country.
We're just going to go through the top 4. Let's go to the next one. Judge Raymond Kethledge of Michigan. He sits on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit, clerk for Justice Kennedy. He's not as well known in Washington, but it seems to me that it could be that being an outsider might not be a bad thing in this drain the swamp culture, no?
Well, Raymond Kethledge is a superb judge. He's also been on the bench for about as long as Judge Kavanaugh. He has an outstanding writing style, much like Neil Gorsuch. Recently wrote a book on leadership that sort of made the rounds in conservative circles, and has also written eloquently on things like textualism, originalism, skepticism about deference that's shown to executive branch agencies, all issues that conservatives care about.
The only woman to be in the top 4, Judge Amy Coney Barrett of Indiana, sits on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. She made her rounds on Capitol Hill before. Let's play the clip, that famous exchange with Senator Dianne Feinstein.
The dogma lives loudly within you, and that's of concern when you come to big issues that large numbers of people have fought for years in this country.
Will her religious views help galvanize support for her, do you believe, or hurt?
Boy, that's tough to say, because a lot of this is going to come down to what Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski think about her with respect to Roe versus Wade. She's a very impressive individual. She also clerked on the Supreme Court for Justice Scalia, and although she's only been a judge for about 8 months, she was a distinguished academic at George Washington Law School, University of Virginia, and since 2002 at Notre Dame, and she received support not only from the entire faculty of Notre Dame Law School, but 73 distinguished law professors from across the country of all political stripes wrote letters of support. And as you can see from that clip, she really held up as grace under fire during a very contentious confirmation hearing.
Finally, Judge Thomas Hardiman of Pennsylvania sits on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 3rd Circuit.
That's right.
And he served with the president's sister. What effect will this or won't this have on moving him forward through this process?
Well, it's hard to say. Tom Hardiman is a prince of a guy. He has a very compelling story. first member of his family to graduate from college, drove a cab to put himself through college and law school. He's actually been the judge the longest amount of time. He was a district court judge from 2003 to 2006 and has sat on the Third Circuit since then. He's written a lot of very powerful opinions on the Second Amendment, on religious liberty, and on other issues as well. A very humble, self-effacing man. I think he would hold up very well in a confirmation hearing.
Before you go, and I'm being told to wrap, but before
Okay.
we go, I want to know your opinion on the fact that these justices could reverse Roe versus Wade. Is that even a possibility in your mind?
Well, it's always a possibility. However, the Democrats have been predicting the demise of Roe versus Wade ever since Sandra Day O'Connor was nominated. There's only one justice, Clarence Thomas, who's outright called for Roe versus Wade to be reconsidered and reversed. And so, you know, with John Roberts on the court and with the other justices not expressing their view, I think it's largely a scare tactic being employed by the Democrats.
John Malcolm, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
President Trump says he's confident North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will honor his pledge to eliminate his nuclear arsenal. High-level talks between the U.S. and North Korea appear to have hit a snag. The North is accusing Washington of making gangster-like demands. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. North Korea does not appear to be happy with the United States following Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit over the weekend. They say the U.S. has betrayed the spirit of last month's summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, but Pompeo says that's not true.
We still have a long ways to go, but the commitment that the North Koreans made, frankly, that Chairman Kim personally made to President Trump, remains, has been reinforced.
Secretary Mike Pompeo saying North Korea is committed to denuclearization. Pompeo unable to escape questions about his recent North Korean trip, even while on an unannounced stop in Afghanistan today.
I'd really prefer to talk about Afghanistan, given where we are. Do you have a question about Afghanistan?
On Saturday, North Korea state media slammed what it called the U.S. gangster-like mindset during Pompeo's talks. The next day, Pompeo responded directly, saying if the U.S. is making gangster-like requests, then the world is a gangster, because it was a unanimous decision at the UN Security Council about complete denuclearization. Regional allies like South Korea say they support Pompeo's hard line.
Our combined defense posture will remain ironclad. Our two countries will continue to maintain watertight coordination in any and all issues related to the ROK-US alliance.
The secretary has been trying to hammer out the details of denuclearization. The North Koreans want a gradual drawdown of nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief, but Pompeo is promising regional allies like South Korea and Japan they will not let up their sanctions until they can see and verify that North Korea has eliminated all of their nuclear weapons and shut down all of their nuclear facilities. Lauren.
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. After a two-day high-stakes rescue operation, 8 of the 12 boys trapped for days in a flooded cave system in Thailand are now safe.
We have 2 obstacles, water and time.
Officials say the 8 boys are safe and conscious and recuperating in a hospital, but there is a sense of urgency to remove the remaining boys and their soccer coach. Oxygen levels inside the cave are dropping, and the rain continues to fall, making water levels rise. The evacuations are a dangerous process. 2 divers are accompanying each of the boys. Authorities say removing those who remain may take more than one final operation. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte says he'll resign if anybody can prove God exists. Duterte blasted basic tenets of the Catholic faith on Friday during a speech at the opening of a science and technology event. Last month, he called God stupid. The country's Catholic Bishops' Conference calls for a day of prayer next Monday for those who have, quote, blasphemed God. They also want the faithful to do a 3-day fast starting next Tuesday. The country is more than 2/3 Catholic. 2 pro-Brexit leaders have resigned, citing poor handling by British Prime Minister Theresa May. May says she accepts their decisions, but the moves have shaken her government to its foundation. One of those departing is British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. He was a main cheerleader for Britain's exit from the European Union. His decision came hours after the government's main pro-Brexit leader also resigned. Jeremy Hunt will replace Johnson as Foreign Secretary. Britain is blaming Russia for killing a woman exposed to a nerve agent. She died yesterday in a southern England hospital. Dawn Sturgis was hospitalized on June 30th after falling ill. Police say she was exposed to the same type of nerve agent used to poison a former Russian spy and his daughter earlier this year. Russia has denied any involvement. A Catholic priest and several parishioners say they were spat on by a group of Protestant marchers on Saturday in Scotland. The Archdiocese of Glasgow says the incident happened as Father Tom White stood outside his church after Mass. Police say they are investigating. Pope Francis is sending a top-level diplomat to the Holy See's embassy in Congo. Archbishop Ettore Balestro was the Vatican's ambassador to Colombia and is being sent to settle the affairs of the embassy. The Vatican recalled its ambassador earlier this year over clashes with the government. Catholic activists have led nationwide demonstrations against President Joseph Kabila. Pope Francis warns Christian could soon disappear from the Middle East.
Un Medio Oriente senza cristiani non sarebbe Medio Oriente.
A Middle East without Christians is no longer the Middle East. The Holy Father made the comments Saturday during a trip to the southern Italian town of Bari. There he met Orthodox patriarchs and Catholic leaders. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliette, the Holy Father referred to a murderous indifference that has caused many Christians to flee the Middle East. Is he talking about ISIS?
Lauren, he's blaming the international community, those who've been seeking power and profit through what he calls arms dealing and oil and gas exploitation at the expense of the region's people. So Francis said the world has been ignoring the deadly conflicts in the region for too long, and the result is the deaths of thousands and an enormous number of refugees, which would include tens of thousands of Christians who've been driven from their homes. Now, in his opening prayer, the Holy Father said the Middle East represents the source of Christianity, where our souls are rooted. Yet, he said that war, occupation, fundamentalism, and forced migration are destroying it.
It's something that we at EWTN News Nightly have been covering intensely for the last 18 months. So tell us more about this trip and who was there and who wasn't there.
Well, the Holy Father was speaking during a one-day meeting that brought together Christian leaders from the Middle Eastern churches to pray and to reflect on the crisis in the Middle East. Now, the host city was Bari in southern Italy, and it's a highly symbolic location because it bridges east and west through its patron saint, St. Nicholas. Now, the Pope prayed with ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, as well as the patriarchs of the ancient churches of Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, amongst others. Now, Lauren, the group prayed in front of relics of the patron saint, but noticeably absent from this group, Lauren, was Patriarch Kirill of Russia. So Metropolitan Hilarion, someone well known at the Vatican, was there in his place. But as we know, Lauren, the Patriarch Kirill has been a strong supporter of Russian President Vladimir Putin's military intervention in Syria.
Pope Francis has always talked about the Middle East and the importance of peace. What did this day of prayer achieve, if anything?
Well, just managing to bring together the region's key Orthodox patriarchs, as well as the Lutheran leaders and their Christian representatives in the Holy Land, I guess it's an achievement in itself, Lauren, isn't it? And they came together to denounce the violence and to pray for peace. And that was a strong sign to the world of the absolute unity amongst Christians, of Christian unity. And Francis is continuing efforts at promoting the reunion with the Orthodox Church. And in addition, of course, the hope is that the Pope's words will resonate within the region and that the fighting will hopefully let up. He hopes Christians can return to their homes and pick up the pieces of their lives. Now, Pope Francis also helped to release doves, as we saw, with a group of children in Bari as a sign of peace, Lauren.
Wonderful day and wonderful day of prayer. So important, especially in that region of the world. Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, a Marquette University lawyer breaks down the Catholic school's defeat at the state Supreme Court. And what Pope Francis told fans of Brazil's World Cup soccer team. Marquette University says it will comply with a court ruling and reinstate a professor suspended without pay. 72-year-old John McAdams was suspended without pay in 2016 after he wrote a blog post criticizing a student instructor that he believed shut down a discussion about the opposition to gay marriage. And the university says that's not what happened. Catholic Schools says he was dismissed for naming the instructor, including a website that had her personal information. And joining us now is Ralph Weber, Associate Professor of Law at Marquette University, who argued the case on behalf of the university. Ralph, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Is this a case about academic freedom?
It is not. What happened here was a tenured professor put a graduate student's name and contact information on the internet. That's not academic freedom, it's cyberbullying. It's a tactic called doxing, in which you put someone's name and contact information on the internet, you rile up people, the unstable in our community, and they go after that.
Is that what happened here?
That's exactly what happened here. As a result of this blog post, she was inundated with vile and horrific threats. She transferred universities, she had to redo her coursework, she changed her appearance, her life was turned upside down. That's not okay.
But didn't she shut down a discussion about gay marriage?
No, the classroom discussion was about a philosophical principle from John Rawls. It was not about gay marriage. And there was an after-class discussion about gay marriage that, yes, could have been handled better and was a teaching moment for that graduate.
Well, it was also recorded by a student who came up and said, "You are not letting me talk about my opposition to gay marriage."
Yeah, he misdescribed what happened. He secretly recorded her in this after-class discussion, and when she asked him if he was recording the conversation, she first said no.
So the problem here, from this conservative blogger's opinion, is that we are talking about the stifling of his creative blog, his ability to express himself.
Right.
It's not a university blog.
Right, and he's stifled in no way. He's done over 3,000 blog posts in the last 10 years, never disciplined, and would not have been disciplined here if he hadn't used her name and connected to a website linking her contact information. That's what this is about. Doxing, it's not about any topic, it's not about politics, it's been misdescribed.
What are the national implications of this verdict?
The national implications are universities have a remarkable way of resolving faculty conduct and misconduct within the university, with faculty on the one hand, administrators on the other. And they set up, as happened here, a panel of expert faculty to review the conduct and say, this is within or outside professional norms. Here you had 7 tenured faculty members say at this Catholic Jesuit university what he did was wrong. The court then said, no, we're going to substitute our judgment for the judgment of the tenured faculty, and that's a mistake.
Professor McAdams argued that Marquette Warrior, which is his personal website, has been used for more than a decade to condemn political correctness, and his verdict is now allowing him to return to work. He said he's going to continue his blog. How is the university and the campus going to heal?
Well, he has the right to return to the campus, and he will. He has a right to blog, and he can. But I can assure you, Marquette will continue to enforce professional standards and will continue to protect students.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ralph Weber, Associate Professor of Law at Marquette University, who argued the case on behalf of the university.
Great.
Up next, why these priests in the Midwest are a real hit. The Holy See Press Office announces Pope Francis will travel to Panama in January for World Youth Day. It's an international event bringing young people together, started by Pope John Paul II.
E vedo bandiere brasiliane.
And Pope Francis tries to cheer up Brazilian soccer fans yesterday after the team's quarterfinal exit from the World Cup. The Pope, an avid soccer fan, noted seeing a lot of Brazilian flags in St. Peter's Square for the Angelus and said, have courage. There will be a next time. The Pope's team, Argentina, was eliminated in the round of 16. Finally tonight, 2 dioceses in the Midwest come up with a unique way to raise funds for their seminaries. You could almost say the idea is a home run. It's an annual softball game. Thank you to Christian, our writer, for that great pun. Priests from Kansas City, St. Joseph in Missouri play their neighbors from Kansas City, Kansas. Kansas, wearing blue, won in extra innings by 1 run. This year's event drew more than 3,500 fans to a minor league baseball stadium. It was glove, right, at first sight? Okay, sorry. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless.